All right, well, everybody, welcome to the first episode of HWL Talks, where we meet with leaders and innovators throughout healthcare. And my name is Trevor Strauss. I'm the Senior Vice President at HWL, and I'm fortunate to be joined today by Leigh Hamby, who has had a very, very successful career. He's actually the outgoing CMO over at Piedmont, and he's done it all from the bedside and surgery all the way through the C-suite. And he's been quite a pioneer in some of these areas, and we're going to touch on those today. I've been very fortunate to get to know Leigh over the last number of months and spend some time with him, get to know him and his teams. And so I think this is going to be a great discussion today. Leigh, before we jump in, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, tell the audience about your background, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Trevor. It's an honor to be a guest here today. I'm a native of Atlanta. I grew up in Gwinnett County and went to college and medical school at Emory University. Married my high school sweetheart. And then I matched in general surgery at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. I didn't know where Kentucky was, but I had done a rotation up there. So I was very excited to do my general surgery training there, which took 6 years. I did an extra year of clinical research. And then I joined my best friend from residency in Dothan, Alabama. And I was a general surgeon in a 3-man group there for a number of years and got interested in healthcare administration. And so I can go into that now if you want, or we can stop and see what other questions you want to go with.
Yeah, well, why don't we start a little bit about kind of what it was like when you were starting out, right? I mean, you went into private practice, and so I know you've had some very interesting experiences there that kind of shaped the direction of your career. So let's touch on that a little bit, right? Coming into this, you're fresh out of your training, and you're kind of diving into private practice. Tell us about kind of that journey when you started, what you saw, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the leadership and maybe what transitioned you that direction.
Sure. So I really enjoyed private practice. I didn't think I was going to like it. I had sort of always dabbled with the idea of maybe being an academic. I did a lot of research and published several publications in residency, but it actually turned out I really enjoyed private practice. The guy I was in practice with, a guy named Wes Smith, we were best buds, and we worked with a senior partner and sort of grew up together. And it's even true more now than it was then. But when you come out of training, you know how to do all the basic stuff, but it's a matter of repetition and experience. And so we practiced together for a number of years. And then I sort of realized that being a good clinician is really only part of the story. So you can do a technically great operation, but if the Department of Radiology loses your film or the nurse gives the wrong medication, again, we see these things not uncommonly throughout residency and wherever you're in practice. So the patient's experience is not only dependent on their physician, but it's dependent on the whole system working. And in general, I have found that most of healthcare really isn't even a system. It's pretty broken. And I think a lot of people are aware of that. There's a number of published studies around patient safety, of patients actually being harmed as a result of their care. And so that sort of set me out on a journey ostensibly to try to fix healthcare. And to me, the first step for that as a practicing physician was to learn the administrative side of the house. So I went and got a master's in healthcare administration ostensibly so I could tell the administrators what I needed them to do, which turns out not I wasn't very successful at that, right? In fact, you can't tell anybody else what to do. I have 4 kids, and they have taught me that well. So that beginning journey of what I set out to do and was not able to do kind of evolved into there's really a whole different set of skills to be a leader in a healthcare organization that you may or may not get in your physician experience. So that's what set me out.
That kind of takes me back to, I remember, I guess it's about 17 years ago now, when I first came into this world, right? I mean, I kind of fell into it from banking and was kind of learning my way around. And I met a CEO, and one of the pieces of wisdom he imparted on me was from a medical staff component. And this will lead us in a little bit to your journey, but from a medical staff component, when he was trying to run a hospital, he said you could take the square root of your medical staff, and those are the ones who are loyal to you. You need to find them, cultivate them, grow them, and engage them so that you can be successful in healthcare. And some of the things you and I have talked about over time, about physicians moving into leadership, right? And how when you did it, it wasn't necessarily as common for you to go back and get your, master's healthcare administration and do these things. It wasn't something that a lot of physicians were doing at the time that you did it. So you kind of mentioned that some of the experiences you had within your private practice led you to this, realizing that whether it's good physicians getting bad habits and not being able to impact that, or it's, some of the other things outside of your control. Why don't you tell us about that journey of saying, okay, it's time for me to move to a true leadership role, and really what those goals were when you first did it. And then we can talk a little bit about Piedmont and that growth.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. It really is a difficult point in one's career when you go from being a practicing physician. And again, as a surgeon, at the end of every day, I could sort of evaluate my own personal effectiveness. You could sort of look at in your mind, go through the list of patients you saw on that given day, and help that person, couldn't help that person, hurt that person, whatever. When you move into administration, there's nothing as satisfying as that. It's very much participative and collaborative, but you really can't tell at the end of the day what you actually accomplished. I deleted some emails, I had a meeting, I made a couple of good points, said some stupid stuff, said some smart stuff. And it's really only after, 5 or 10 or 15 years can you really start to evaluate whether you're, making any progress or not. And, physicians, we are really brought up as autonomous, independent, entities. I mean, a lot of physicians are entrepreneurs because at the end of the day, we like to believe, and it's a fallacy, that my patient's outcome is dependent on me and my patient, right? It's about the sanctity of that relationship. Well, it's actually many more things play a part in the outcome of the patient in that relationship than your skill and technology and all that sort of stuff. And so I had to learn that it wasn't just about talking to other doctors. It's how to actually engage in the system of people who weren't clinicians or weren't providers, and realize and acknowledge they have a role to play, and try to bring all the folks together that are trying to deliver care to understand what each other is doing, what my part of it is, and how might I improve my part over the way we're doing it now. Because at the end of the day, nobody ever set out and designed the process of care that we use, very rarely. Most of these processes of care have evolved through tribal knowledge and habits over 10 to 15 years. And you ask me, why do we do it this way? Most of the common answer is, it's the way we've always done it. And that to me is the big enemy in healthcare today, is that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah, and I know for you that the way we've always done it, and waste within healthcare, right? You've said some things in different presentations I've heard you make, or discussions that we've had about, healthcare is built for a lot of people, but not the patient. And so how did you, as you think about this from the leadership perspective, because there will be people listening to this that, maybe they are practicing right now and they want to grow into higher level administrative roles, or they've just transitioned and they're moving into a, mid-level role. How did you manage this process of saying, we got to pull these things together? We got to remember that the patient needs to be core, while balancing that with the business needs of running a hospital.
Yeah, as a physician, the dream job that everyone is looking for, I think, is part-time clinical practice and part-time administrative work.
Okay.
And frankly, I found it impossible to do that. Now, again, I made the transition before the concept of a surgicalist. There was no such word. So the idea I tried to do a part-time clinical practice in surgery, say 2 days a week, one day in the clinic, one day in the OR, then 3 days I'll be, doing administrative stuff. The world isn't that simple. And so nowadays, I think if you were a surgicalist, you could do some dedicated clinical work to kind of keep your skills up, but they're not your patients for the most part. And again, the thing I enjoyed most about private practice is these were my patients. I had a relationship with them. They call me in the middle of the night. I know who they are. I can know the sound of their voice. And a lot of that's kind of gone out of healthcare. And so as physicians move into administrative roles, they're going to have to decide, am I going to try to maintain a clinical practice, or I'm going to make a clean break and be purely administrative? And I think the concern that most docs have is there's no way the administrative stuff can be that time consuming. And I'll tell you that it is, particularly as a physician in administration. A lot of the meetings that you're going to have and people you need to work with are physicians. And physicians can only meet really early in the morning or really late in the afternoon or early evening. So your hours are actually worse in administrative medicine. At least I found that to be the case.
I found that as well on my side of the house. So.
Yeah, no one tells you that.
Nope.
So deciding as a physician how much clinical time you're going to try to do and how to do it safely while also getting your chops for administration. And again, there's sort of two kinds of administrative roles. One is sort of overseeing other doctors, right? A practice leader, managing a practice, or being the principal within a practice. And again, that's an important skill set, being a group leader or the group leader in your practice. That's different than sort of being an administrator that's working part of the whole system. You're not just leading physicians, you're trying to lead a system of which physicians are a part. And so you have to be a little bit more balanced in your perspective, and that it isn't always trying to optimize the physician's productivity, the physician's throughput, which if you're managing a group practice, that's kind of the thing that's on your mind is how do I make sure all my doctors and APPs are being as productive as they can, versus if you're trying to change a system, part of which are providers, you got to look at the whole bottle of wax, which to me, the best way to get experience is to go to the GIMBA, go to the place where the work is done and see how people do their job and observe them, ask them questions, and be genuinely curious. How do they get their work done? What can make your work better, safer, faster, or more joyful for you as a worker? And you're not going to get that being only your physician perspective. You're going to have to, walk around with a nurse manager or spend time with a transporter. Those are really the important lessons learned, so you can sort of see how the whole thing tries to fit together.
Yeah, well, and obviously you've had to do a lot of listening, right, in your career in administration within Piedmont, because you were there when it was 2 hospitals and now you're 20 plus. So what kind of, whether it's leadership lessons or it's things that you found that worked really, really well for you when you've been integrating these new locations into the Piedmont system, what can you share with the audience around how to do that effectively and still maintain the, whether you want to call it the acquiring entity's direction or your direction as the senior leader, you're balancing what they have always done with what needs to be done?
Yeah, no, that has been the bulk of the work that I've been doing for the last 15 years. And I don't know if I'd say I'm any good at it, but there are lessons to be learned. I think lesson number 1 is kind of what I was just talking about. Healthcare is a team sport. As a physician, in particular as a surgeon, we're kind of socialized to be, we're the captain of the ship. We need to know everybody's job and tell everybody how to do their job. And that care is way too complicated now to have that perspective. And so you got to understand that healthcare is a team sport. Everybody's role is important. And so you need to understand that. I think the second part is really, it sounds kind of hokey, but you really have to love people. If you don't love people, then you got to ask yourself why you're a physician. And I struggled with that. I got to tell you, early on in my career, I would say that I loved individual people, but as a collective species, I didn't care for them too much. And I've had to realize that that's because I saw my job was to lead my agenda and achieve what I wanted to achieve, which turned out maybe not to be the right thing to focus on, whether pay attention to everyone that's on the team and listen to them, because the solutions are in their mind and in their experience. You just have to be able to listen and identify it and bring it out. And so when we have a new hospital that joined the family, who've been successful for 100 years, we need to listen to how they do it, because even though it may be different the way we've been doing it, there's something we could probably learn.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is to be humble. Again, as a surgeon, that doesn't necessarily come with the job. And so I've had to spend a lot of time, personal and spiritual reflection, trying to know that that's an important aspect of who I want to be. And that's a daily practice for me, is to work on that. And I'd say finally, and last but not least, realize that someday we're all going to be patients. And so let's build a system that you'd be willing to be taken care of, or have a family member be a part of. Whereas most of the time in healthcare, when we get sick, we call the secret backline number, or we call who we know to be the anesthesiologist that day to make sure they do my family member, right? And until we can build a system where we don't care who's flying the plane that day, then we know that we're not there yet. So those would be the kind of lessons that I think I've learned and still learning every day.
Well, I think that's great. And, you mentioned humility. I mean, in speaking to and hearing from, leaders within the system that you've worked with, it sounds like even though you may not feel that you've always been perfectly humble or, we're growing over time, you seem to have really made a big impact there at Piedmont. And so, we've got probably about 5 minutes left here. And I think we could dive into 100 different things. But one of the things that's always fascinating, at least it has been for me personally, and I hope for our audience, is either final words of wisdom or looking back saying, what's the one thing that you wish you could have changed during your career, right? And you're in that reflective state right now with coming up on retirement in a few days. And so what is that one thing that you really kind of wish maybe you changed or had done slightly differently, those types of things in your career?
No, it is funny. As I'm packing up my office and making plans for my retirement date is 12/28, and so as I think about January, right? They print calendars with January on it now, and I won't be working, and so it is a little bit odd, and you can't help but be somewhat reflective. I think the thing I wish I had learned sooner was to be more compassionate and to be able to see people, as God, our Creator, sees them, as children of God, as equal potential. They have worth, and they're not a barrier for me to overcome, right? And again, a lot of my time and career, I think, was spent seeing other people as an obstruction to what I wanted to achieve. And I think I wasted a lot of time in my career versus if I had sort of truly felt compassion and desire to know people and hear what they had to say, I probably could have got a lot more done a lot faster with a lot fewer apology meetings that I've had to have throughout my career. There's a wake of bodies of people that, I've made cry that I had to go back and apologize. And it's so much easier to not make them cry in the beginning than try to go back and do mending your fences. So that's the lesson I wish I had learned sooner. As we get older, I think it's easier to see hubris in ourselves and in others. But when you're young, you can't hear it. You think you know everything. You think, I'm fully trained. I'm board certified. I'm at the top of my game until you get humbled by a patient or by a disease or by a process. So that would be my parting words.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, look, sometimes we need our surgeons to just have that hubris and just go forward and get the job done, right?
Yeah. No, there is a place for confidence, which is not necessarily the antithesis of humility. I think hubris is more the antithesis, but confidence is much more valuable and important. And being decisive, again, there's a time for that, but you can do that without running over people. And that's what I would think about. I wish I'd done earlier and more often.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, look, you've shared a lot of great points today. And as healthcare continues to change, we've got silos breaking down. We've got more people involved. We have more physicians moving into leadership. And all I can say is it has been an absolutely true pleasure getting to know you over the last number of months, being able to spend time with you, learn from you. And, I think that the things you shared with our audience today are one great way to kick off HWL Talks. You've seen it all during your career. And so we're truly appreciative that you joined us today.
Well, I'm happy for you and your new podcast. I look forward to following along and see how it grows and matures. So congratulations to you and your team.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Leigh. It was great to see you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Trevor.
All right. Well, and hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining HWL Talks today. We hope that you enjoyed this session, and certainly subscribe now so that you can continue to follow leaders and innovators within healthcare. And we look forward to seeing you soon.